Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies being
Yeah,
noted?
we've got Councillor Lee Hartshorn, who has sent Councillor Durrant a substitute, and we've got apologies from Councillor P.T. Elliott, who sent Councillor Baker in his place.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and the nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests and or other interests not already on their register of interests in any on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do members have anything to declare? Yes, Councillor Baker.
I take guidance on this, Chair. I'm Chair of Wigglesworth Parish Council. You've seen the comments of Wigglesworth Parish Council, neither objection nor for the proposal. So I'll take guidance from the assembled where I should be present for that motion, that matter to be discussed.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. I'll take advice on that. Is everybody okay with that? Is that all right? That's fine then. Minutes to the last minute. We now have the minutes of our meeting held on the 24th June 2025. Are we happy that's a correct record?
Yeah, move it, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, NED 24/00479 Wingleworth. The first application in respect of Pioneer House, Mill Lane, Wingleworth. We have one registered speaker on this application, Joy Redfern, who is speaking as the applicant. Pardon? All right, planning officer, do you want to do a...
Yes, we'll just do a brief presentation, chair and introduction. Phil will provide that for members.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a 2-year temporary permission for a waste refuse vehicle hub, conversion of a storeroom to welfare facility and the new access ramp at Pioneer House, Mill Lane. At the site visit yesterday, members asked where the existing Ricknell vehicles which occupy the site would park. We've had confirmation that these will be parked on the available spaces in the Pioneer House car park that don't form part of the application site. The application site is the Pioneer House car park to the southeast of the Mill Lane offices, which are in the centre of the screen. Refuse vehicles would enter and exit via the NEDDC car park entrance and go around the back of the building to the car park. They would exit via the existing one-way system. This is a zoomed in image of the site showing the entrance off Mill Lane and the car park highlighted in yellow. Existing parking at Pioneer House can be seen to the rear of the building. This is the site location plan showing the application site edged in red. This is the proposed block plan. The car park will provide space for 5 refuse collection vehicles, 3 food waste collection vehicles, 2 compact sweepers and 2 Ford Transit pickups. There would also be 22 spaces allocated for the street scene team. Proposals include a welfare facility within an existing building in the northeast corner of the site. There is a wheel wash facility proposed next to the welfare building. 1 car park space will be lost within the Mill Lane car park adjacent to the northwest corner of the building, which would allow for vehicles to corner with a new curve line created. A new access ramp would be required between the 2 car parks, as the Ricknell car park is at a lower level than the Mill Lane. This drawing shows the position of the proposed 2-metre high acoustic fence highlighted in green. This is a photo taken from the rear of Mill Lane looking towards Pioneer House. The access will be to the left of the garages in the centre of the photo. Photo from Pioneer House looking back towards the NEDDC offices at the point where the new access ramp is proposed. It's a photo towards a new welfare facility, which is a single-storey building on the right. Between the 2 buildings, the wheel wash facility is proposed. It's a photo looking south. The refuse vehicles will be parked where the white vans currently are. A new 2-metre acoustic fence is proposed around the refuse vehicle parking. A photo of the area where the refuse vehicles will be parked. Again, the acoustic fence will be around the edge of the car park. And the view looking north with the council officers to the left. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have one registered speaker on the application, Joy Redfern, who's speaking as the applicant. If you would like to take a seat at the desk, you have 3 minutes. Please start when you are ready.
No. Yeah, they
Turned it on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair. So the reason why we needed to move our current location is because of the Simpler Recycling policy that's come into force through the Environment Act. Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
That's better.
Okie dokie. As of the Environment Act 20, we've basically been having to introduce a new food waste collection. So that's a national policy for all local waste authorities. As a result of that, in April 2026, there will be a separate food waste collection for all residential properties. We have to be able to accommodate additional fleet of vehicles to do it, so our existing vehicles wouldn't be able to collect them. They've basically got an enclosed container and they don't have a compaction element, so it requires a whole new fleet of vehicles. Our current parking arrangement is a lease agreement with Bolsover District Council, and they require the areas that we're currently parking our vehicles to house their fleet when they're getting them. So they're coming in at the 1st of November. So we've been given the details that our lease agreement will come to an end as of the 1st of November, so we need to find alternative accommodation to park these vehicles. So we've done quite a lot of research already, investigating a solution. We were looking at a permanent solution. I'm not sure if you're aware, but our northern parking arrangement up at Eckington, the river next door floods. So we've got our workshop facility there. We're still looking at a long-term solution for where we can move a southern vehicle hub to and a depot, and at that point we'd move our workshop facility to it. But in the meantime, in order to hit this, the particulars of the Environment Act in April next year, we need to find parking arrangement for a temporary solution, which is Mill Lane, we're hoping. So we've looked at other options, and within the time frame and the costs associated with this project, the Mill Lane one was the most reasonable to try and deliver. What I would also say as well is that in January of this year, we've had a direction from Derbyshire County Council to redirect 10,000 tonnes of our waste down to the Clovernook site. We were previously organising our rounds to take it to Sheepbridge. So a lot of our waste now goes to a transfer station in the south of the district. The operational requirements of the site, because we're keeping the depot facility, the workshop facility, all the bins, and the majority of the office facility up in the north of the district, we're literally only parking vehicles here and having a vehicle wash, and the welfare facility, as Phil's demonstrated. So as part of the planning application, and because of the time frame, we've been working with consultees and trying to amend our application to make sure that the planning process was reasonable as we were presenting it to you. So as part of that, we've amended the creation of the fencing, so that's been added following a noise assessment.
Can I hurry you up, please, Joy? Your time is up.
Oh, is it? Okay then. And we've also done things to do with the lighting and obviously the back of the Mill Lane. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. Have members got any questions? Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for coming through that. I just want to confirm a few things. I'm just looking at some of the representations we've received on that about worry about traffic and the like due to moving these vehicles here. Can I just confirm that it's, looking at the pack, it's 12 vehicles comprising of 5 refuse collection vehicles, 3 food waste collection vehicles, 2 compact sweepers and 2 Ford Transit pickups, along with 22 parking spaces to accommodate the operatives. Those 12 vehicles, is that pretty much expected to be static on that front is my first question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the other thing to say with that is that the teams take their lunches out with them, so all their routing is done, so that they're out on the round. They've got routing, they've got areas where they can go to the toilet and things like that, leisure centres and things. So in the day, they very, very rarely come back to the base. They go out of a day and then they come back at their finish time.
Thank you. Oh, where have I gone?
Councillor Leggett.
Oh, it seems to have bounced back to me there.
Just a quick question. I still don't understand why the 2 years. It's got nothing to do with the devolution then?
No.
No.
No. What we're trying to do is find at the same time as this is happening, we're trying to find an alternative solution, a long-term solution to move the workshop to. So it will, in all likelihood, take us a couple of years to be able to do that, to, you know, find the location. We've already hopefully found one, but then actually build it and that element of it. But in the meantime, we'll still hopefully operate the refuse fleet and the maintenance, the servicing of that equipment up at Eckington still.
Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to do a follow-up there. Just to follow on there, so I think reading between the lines on the representations we've received from residents is the concern is that you're going to have all these 12 vehicles coming out at the same time. You're going to have staff coming in all at the same time. So could you just elaborate a little bit of, you know, how do they leave and come back? You're not going to end up with massive queues of all 12 vehicles there, or, you know, everyone queuing to get back in. I think that's the scary point. So could you just elaborate a little bit of how, in practice, these vehicles will come and go from the plot? Yeah,
absolutely. So the refuse teams generally go out first of a morning, and they will do their defect vehicle check, 15 minutes. Whoever gets out first, they'll go out. There could be 2 or 3 minutes in between them all. That's in the morning. The street cleansing crews, they're staggered, so they'll go out even later. So they'll be like half an hour later, and then that'll be staggered as well. As they're coming back in, because they're starting at different start times and the routes are slightly different, they'll come in over a period of time, but they won't be queuing traffic. They'll be able to come straight in off the back of Mill Lane and then come through the car park. In the morning, as they're coming in, as the staff are coming in, they'll just zip straight down Mill Lane and park up and then zip back out again as they finish. And a lot of the teams do get picked up on their rounds, so if it's a round that's going to be done in their local area, it would actually reduce the amount of people coming to the site because they'll just jump on as they're being picked up. Okay.
Anyone else? Councillor Baker.
Thank you for that. Yes, to go a little bit further on the traffic, that was one of the concerns at the parish council. There was no information as to traffic routing and whether some of the vehicles or a number of the vehicles might be tempted to go a lot through Nottingham Drive or Adlington Avenue to bypass any congestion or works on the A61 junction with Mill Lane. Has any thought been given to controlling the traffic routing?
We would be guided by if there was any condition put in relation to that, but invariably the refuse teams are generally out a lot earlier, and if there is congestion in a certain area, they always try and avoid it so that they get done and back before traffic builds up, if that makes any sense. And especially around schools and things like that, they're always done beforehand, so they would always try and approach those areas when there's least likelihood of impact, because they're wanting to get the job done as well.
Thank you for that.
Any other members? Thank you, Joy. You can now take your seat back in the gallery. It's now the time to ask the officers any questions. Councillor Liggett.
Not there.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Foster. I do apologise.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about traffic. I understand on the bottom of page 10 it says that a traffic impact assessment is not one of the validation requirements, which I understand. But as the parish council and residents have raised this as an issue, the first question would be, would it have been a good idea to have a traffic impact assessment based on it's a council that's applying for this this parking? I do understand, even if concerns are raised from a TIA, even if they are raised, I do understand paragraph 116 of the MPPF in that impacts on the road network would have to be severe, or there'd have to be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. Completely understand that, and I would guess that this would come nowhere near that. I would absolutely guess. But would it have been a good idea to have had a traffic impact assessment to have allayed those fears? That's my first question. And second one is about would it be possible to have a condition made on this with regards to the actual route of the vehicles, as mentioned earlier by the chair of the parish council? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Foster. The Highway Authority have raised no objections, and in their response they didn't request any further information. So as officers it wasn't felt reasonable to then go out and ask for this, because obviously the Highway Authority haven't raised that objection, and as you say, it wasn't a validation requirement. It's not classed as a major development. We're happy with Highway Authority's comments on that. On the second question, yes, we could put a condition on. We'd need some guidance as to what you would want included in it and whether it was meeting the relevant test for a planning condition, but in principle, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. I'm just following on from Councillor Foster's question. With an impact assessment of that kind, one thing I'm a little bit confused of what planning applications, looking at the grand scheme thing, would you typically expect to see this kind of highways impact assessment done on in typical states of play? Because from my looking of it at the moment, it doesn't seem like one would fall that, but I want to check with yourselves as you are the experts to make sure that my thinking is correct on that front. So what kind of, in theory, planning applications would we expect to see that sort of impact assessment occur?
Councillor Durrant, we have a validation checklist now for all planning applications, which sets out clearly the requirements that we expect for a plan application in order for it to be validated. A traffic assessment will be required for a major development, so 10 houses or more, for instance, or industrial development of, I think it's 1,000 square metres. This falls well under those thresholds. It's a change of use of the land, so it wasn't required as a requirement to validate the application, and it wasn't requested by the Highway Authority. If they'd have requested one, then it's a different question. But like I say, they haven't raised any objection to it.
Just in addition to that, Chair, if I can just add to the debate about highways, etc., you've got to take into account the level of traffic that's already using Mill Lane from both our offices, as the office next door, albeit currently underused, the other activities, the housing development. So there's already a significant amount of traffic that's operating out of Mill Lane, and in our opinion as officers, and I believe in terms of the comments that the Highway Authority have made, the additional traffic that this would cause, potentially the level of activity that you've been discussing, is, in my opinion, small and would add very little to the overall traffic and the activity that's taking place along Mill Lane and potentially on some of the other roads that are going through the area as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's, once again, it's about a similar kind of thing, but it's basically on-site practicalities and fire evacuation procedures. At the back of the building there, where the vehicles are actually entering, are there exits there in the event of emergencies? And would anybody be moving from that area into the main body or fire assembly point?
I take advice from others who perhaps work closer to the areas that Councillor Cooper's talking about, Chair, but in general terms, the evacuations that I've been involved with primarily involve people going out of the, I don't know which part of the compass it is, but across the other side of the building from us and then up through the car park. So it would be my view, and I appreciate Councillor Cooper's expertise in this area, Chair, but I don't think by permitting this scheme it would prejudice the safe exit of people from the building in terms of those eventualities.
Okay, thanks for that, Adrian. My concern is, though, that it's not about me looking at stopping it because of this. It's making sure that practicalities are put into place and it's part of the fire evacuation procedures moving forward, and vehicles entering site are aware about speed limits, etc., etc., and that's reaffirmed, and fire evacuation procedures are followed and updated and obviously tried, if not once, twice a year, just to make sure that there's going to be no issues, and everybody's well aware that the vehicles that enter inside are of a bigger size than a normal car. It is quite tight as you go around that corner out back, I have to say, albeit I know the parking space will be moved. But I'm just concerned that if a vehicle does turn up at that time, they're aware as well, and they know what their procedures are in that case.
My suggestion would be, Chair, if members are minded to grant permission this afternoon, that a note's attached to any permission in respect of that matter. And of course, the applicants here, Chair, will have heard what Councillor Cooper said, and I'm sure we'll act on that in that vein as well.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Councillor Leggett.
I just wonder, Adrian, where the Ricknell vans are going to park that are still parking there now.
Hi, Councillor. Yes, they're going to be parked, as far as I'm told, they'll be parked at the existing parking behind Pioneer House. It was shown on one of the photographs, so it's outside of the Red Line site, but there's already existing parking at Pioneer House, so they'll go there.
Any other questions, members? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to follow on about the traffic again. Whilst it's obvious that the overall impact of total vehicle movements might not be significant when compared to existing traffic flows, I think the point that local residents feel is this vehicle movements commence at 6:15 a.m. and, as has just been explained, will go in a staggered slots until all the vehicles have left the site and gone out on their rounds. And concern is that some of the vehicles will take a shortcut up Nottingham Drive or through Adlington Avenue, and at Nottingham Drive, don't forget there's a junior school at the top of there where the parking congestion is already quite high, and where it is also on a bus route. And so hence the request for some form of traffic routing condition, if one can be devised, to prevent such things happening. And the same on the return of the vehicles. You know, maybe to get to the hub, it will be quicker to come down through Wingleworth rather than go round Wingleworth. And so things like that are what's prompted various comments. I understand and I'm pleased to see that some residents' concerns about lighting and noise have now been addressed since we first saw the initial inputs to this, and so that was good. And it was interesting to see comments made about the reason for it, because we couldn't see one reason for asking for a planning statement was that could have been explained to people as to the reason for the move. I think it would have gone a long way to help concerns, even though it's not on your statutory list. This is information that's very valuable, so thanks for the speaker today. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I will now move on to the debate. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Well, while we are debating between ourselves, we've got the Chair of the Parish Council here, who's said already that he's not predetermined, and from my experience, he'd still be able to take part in this discussion, this debate and this vote. That's from my experience in the past. I'd happily support any condition of routing of traffic if local councils, I'm not local to this area, if they've got an idea of which route would be the best for these vehicles to avoid compromising the amenity of residents.
Thank you, Councillor
Chair.
Foster. Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure with the routing. I'm open to it, but I'd need a little bit more info. I'm just appraising myself again of the local route, and could you tell me which, Councillor Baker, if you could tell me which primary school you were referring to, because I thought where you were looking at.
It's Hunlow Primary School.
Yeah.
Which is further up from Nottingham Drive into the village.
Right.
Anecdotally, there's been an increase in the number of refuse vehicles making its way up there from 6:20 to 7:30, 8:15, some mounting the pavement to avoid cars. Now, that's another matter, the congestion outside the school. Yeah, I don't wish to get bogged down with that. But what went through my mind was, and I've seen it before, the vehicles should use the main road network and not shortcut. That Nottingham Drive is the last unramped, uncontrolled, unweight restricted route because it's a bus route. And Adlington Avenue, similarly, if you are struggling to get out of Mill Lane, it's very tempting to go down Adlington Avenue and pull out of the lights there, which exist. So they're the two main roads that we would consider not on the main road network, main route network, that could benefit from some form of restriction, that only essentially refuse vehicles go up there, those that are servicing the area. Those that are servicing other villages should come down the main highway network, we believe.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, so effectively what you're saying is if they're gonna pull out onto Mill Lane, they should stick to the A61 and go along it, rather than trying to cut down onto Long Edge Lane by going through Long Edge Rise and Nottingham.
Any of those associated roads, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Similarly down at Adlington.
Because you're still going to get the problem where you get those current refuse vehicles, because that's their route. If they're picking up rubbish from Nottingham, they're still going to get those. Yeah.
There's no objection to that.
Yeah.
It's increased
Yeah.
traffic by bringing the hub here. We're going out from the spider's web from here instead of coming in from elsewhere, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, still amiable to it. I mean, just to go through the other representations we have, I don't really, accept some of the representations that we had that, this is going to have queues of traffic, because it's not, it's going to be staggered. The other thing, I think you'd agree with me that we don't really need an impact assessment, the highways impact assessment on this. I'm looking at okay with agreeing with you on the condition that they don't go along those small roads. But I don't think this needs an impact assessment at this time, having had a read through and just having clarifications from the officers. But I'm amiable to go along with conditions of don't use the small roads. Yeah.
Councillor Liggett.
Just to confirm with Councillor Baker, you want the main access in and out to be this entrance straight up to the A61, straight up Mill Lane, nobody turning left and nobody coming back in from that angle either. So that every vehicle will be going the shortest route up to the 61 from here.
Well, unless it's servicing
Oh yeah.
the immediate houses.
Yeah.
But vehicles coming to other locations, such as Hollymore Side, Shirland, anywhere, don't go through.
Don't go out of here and turn left, basically.
Basically, don't come out. Well, that's one way, yeah. Because if you cast your mind back when this was going to be a hub, when there was going to be a full-time relocation of the service vehicles to here, there was going to be a roundabout and a bypass. That was part of the master plan back in 2018-19, and we've moved on from there now. So the use of this could be elastic, even though it's a 2-year permission. Once the principle of the development is established, it could be elastic, that. So we want those people who are concerned want a more permanent solution to the traffic problem, because it could last for some time. And if the problem is minimised to an acceptable level, there's no, as Councillor Durrant says, we've passed the traffic impact assessment point of view now, because there's no point going back and doing that. I think it can be dealt with by the condition.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're in the debate, and I know it's not questions to officers, but when officers hear about what we're discussing, would a condition to promote a certain route for the service be more suitable, or would a condition avoiding 2 particular or 3 particular roads be more suitable? Thank you, Chair.
I'll perhaps come back first, Chair, and if Phil wants to add anything, I'm sure he will. Just on the variety of the issues, first of all, I agree with the discussion that you're having, that a traffic impact assessment isn't necessary in this instance. I think the level of traffic that you're talking about adding to the highway network overall is so small as to not warrant that level of additional work, and I think the Highway Authority comments clarify that point. You've got 2 options in my opinion. First of all, you're only being asked this afternoon to grant permission for a 2-year temporary permission. So as it stands at the moment, if you were to grant permission for what's been asked, you would retain control over potential elongation of that if that were the case. So you have that fallback. So one option would be to go along with the proposal as it stands, and you have 2 years to consider the impacts of that and a reappraisal at the end of that, if indeed the applicant wishes to extend the period. So you've got that one option. The other option you've got, while still considering a 2-year permission, would be to address the issues that are being raised by seeking a routing agreement with the applicant, and we could do that through a planning condition. And the discussion that you're having seems to me that it would read something along the lines of agreeing that with the applicant within a short time period should consent be granted, and that the avoidance of Adlington Avenue and Nottingham Drive would be party of that unless the vehicles were operational and needing to operate along those 2 roads. Because I don't know the geography as well as Councillor Baker probably, but if Nottingham Drive was one of those, it would avoid any access into that labyrinth of roads that you're talking about, and it would avoid going through the Adlington estate. But it would need to be, because those vehicles otherwise need to be operational going to those properties, so you couldn't negate the use of those roads. But it would be something that we agree in general terms with developers of large housing developments sometimes, where vehicles and access and deliveries are coming into the site. They are agreed with the applicant, but you also have the unique advantage here, of course, is that the applicant is sitting in the gallery and is hearing what you're saying, and there is that unique relationship as well. So, but from a purely planning point of view, yes, you could do that through a planning condition, and my suggestion would be it would read something along the lines of agreeing that with the applicant, but with specific avoidance of those two roads unless the vehicles were operational. I hope that helps, Chair.
Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, sorry to come back on this, and sorry to ask for a little bit of clarification there again, and Adrian, if such planning permissions were granted, essentially I think what we're asking is a little bit of a common sense provision on this. Don't use small roads such as these roads that we're talking about, because you're ending up mounting the curbs, you're blocking the school, you're doing daft things. Please don't do that. But in case we've seen before where such as like the A61 has been blocked and things like that, and those vehicles would have to use that. In those, if we were to put that condition on, say don't use Nottingham Drive, etc., and they came circumstances where for whatever reason there's been an accident or something, the A61 is blocked, would they still be permissible to use that? You know, the council wouldn't essentially get in trouble with itself in those circumstances. There's a little bit of common sense here, because we don't. The last thing we want to have, what we want to avoid is small roads being used, but we don't want services being interrupted because of other factors at the same time. So is there that little bit of leeway there in case, you know, something happens on the A61 or something like that?
That could be included within any agreement that we achieve with the applicant. It would allow for, it would be unreasonable to say that in those sort of circumstances you're stuck here and you can't do what you need to do, because that wouldn't achieve the overall objectives of what's being sought anyway. But I think it would be reasonable. I don't have the opportunity of putting this to the applicant, I'm afraid, because that opportunity's passed. But that would be my suggestion. If you feel that matter is so important over a 2-year period that you need to achieve that, then that would be the suggestion I would make to you, that would be a condition similar, as I say, to that we put on large-scale housing developments, for example, where there's large-scale and lots of deliveries and activity, that routing agreement is agreed with the applicant, and it would, in this case, I think, to achieve what the committee are discussing, Chair, would require the avoidance of Adlington Avenue and Nottingham Drive unless those vehicles are operational, or as Councillor Durrant has just said, Chair, unless there are exceptional circumstances. But we wouldn't seek to take formal action in such circumstances anyway, because that would be deemed to be wholly unreasonable, I think.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Without continuing too much on this issue, because I know we've spoke about it a lot, just one small point about what Mr. Kirkham's mentioned. It is only temporary, and it is only 2 years, completely got that, and it can be looked at again in 2 years. However, with local government reform, we may well not be here in 2 years, and the people that make the decision to continue this may well not be. We're lucky, we've got local councils, we've got the chair of the parish council here. I'm guessing the chair of the parish council might not be on a much higher unit tray or whatever we're heading towards, and we won't be there. So having this here just for 2 years puts a stamp on this, and hopefully future councillors and representatives will see it and hopefully continue it. Thank you, Chair.
Do officers have anything they need to add before we move on? Okay, I'm now opening the floor to motions. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. So if such a condition is included, I would move that the planning permission is granted.
Okay. Seconded, yes.
I believe the condition was accepting exceptional circumstances or other wording to be agreed between the applicant and planning managers. Accepting exceptional circumstances, a routing agreement for only operational vehicles to use Adlington Avenue and Nottingham Drive, or words to that effect.
Not to use.
Not to use, yes, not to use.
You'll second that, Councillor Foster, thank you. A motion has been proposed.
Chair, could I just ask for one point of clarification on this? Is the concern about all the vehicles, or is it just about? I think there was five heavy, five refuse collection vehicles, because the other vehicle.
I'd say all of them personally.
Well, how would they go to collect?
Yeah, I would personally disagree. I mean, we're talking about the heavy vehicles, aren't we? We're not talking about little street sweeper. We're talking about the big refuse vehicles, aren't we?
Without wishing to go out of turn, the street sweepers have never caused any concern.
Yeah.
But I think, again, with practicalities, you know, a lot of the roads around Wingworth have got 7.5 tonne limit on. Nottingham Drive hasn't, it's a bus route. But, you know, a full refuse vehicle, I honestly haven't got experience of these food collection vehicles. They don't sound very big, but I'm hoping that can be worked through. It is the big stuff, and also other stuff coming, you know, once it becomes a hub, there will be no way of preventing any other refuse vehicles from coming to it, will there? There'd be no way you could stop that. I mean, the analogy is with the use of satellite. A lot of villages suffer from the same. The delivery vehicle drivers put the sat-nav code in for a place, and they go through the nearest village because the sat-nav takes them that way. And so they cause mayhem, really, up and down the country. That's not just here. So people being people, humans being humans, if there's just a little bit of guidance and effort to stop shortcutting through these particularly congested zones at particular times of the day, which is early in the morning, which we've all acknowledged is the time it's going to happen, and when they're returning to base, then we would feel as though you've gone as far as you can to help the situation. Not trying to be unreasonable, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baker.
So I think if I can just clarify, I apologise, Councillor Baker, if I just clarify that, it's the restriction on the 5 heavy goods vehicles that are of the concern to Councillor Baker and therefore the committee, and it's those that you would wish to have not using Nottingham Drive and Adlington Avenue. I just need to be clear, Chair.
Any of those vehicles that come to and from the hub, the document says 5, but I take that with a pinch of salt. I don't know how that can be restricted to 5.
But if it could be restricted to, say, a weight limit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Weight limits.
Yeah.
Stroke size.
Yeah.
We're not trying to be. I'm not trying to be pedantic and overbearing on this.
Yeah. So I would suggest that I just don't want to misinterpret what Planning Committee are determining this afternoon, Chair. So I apologise for labouring the point, but it's the HGVs, whether it's these 5 or other HGVs that are of concern. It's those that you would wish to see in terms of restriction on the routing. The smaller vehicles, the street sweepers, the diddly bits and pieces, you're not so concerned about. Okay, I understand now, Chair. Thank you.
A motion has now been proposed and seconded. I'll ask members to now vote. Thank you, members. That concludes that item, and we'll move on to the next application. Item 6, NED 25/00415, Tupton. The first application in respect. Planning Officer's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The application is for a retrospective application for the siting of an in-post parcel locker to the front of Unit 5, Ankerbold Road, Old Tupton, Chesterfield. Just to begin with, in relation to the questions raised during yesterday's committee site visits, according to the submitted details, the parcel locker, the subject of this application, was installed on the 11th of March 2025. In response to members' queries regarding permitted development rights for this type of development, officers understand that subject to certain criteria, parcel lockers such as the one proposed in this application could constitute permitted development.
These rights are set out under Schedule 2, Part 7, Class C of the General Permitted Development Order. However, in this case, the parcel locker has already been installed without the necessary prior approval of the local authority. In addition, as the parcel locker is situated within 2 metres of the site curtilage boundary, it would not accord with the limitations of the permitted development rights in question. For those reasons, the locker, the subject of this application, does not constitute permitted development and therefore requires the grant of full planning permission. To summarise the views of officers and for the reasons set out in the committee report, officers consider that the proposed parcel locker would not appear out of keeping with the prevailing character of the street scene, which in this location is characterised by a variety of commercial premises situated on the eastern side of Ankerbold Road. Moreover, the parcel locker is positioned approximately 30 metres away from the nearest residential properties, which are located on the western side of Ankerbold Road. By virtue of this distance, the anticipated use of the parcel locker and the existing commercial backdrop, officers considered that the retention of the locker would not result in any unacceptable impacts from a residential amenity perspective. In terms of highway safety, officers are satisfied that the proposed development would not result in an unacceptable highway safety impact and therefore consider that the proposals would be in accordance with the requirements of Local Plan Policy ID3 and paragraph 116 of the NPPF, which both set out that new development will only be refused on transport grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. This officer view is guided and supported by the DCC Highway Officer consultation response, which raised no objections to the proposed development from a highway safety perspective. In addition, in light of these considerations, officers recommend that the application be approved subject to a standard approved plans condition to ensure conformity with the approved details. Just moving on to the slides. Slide 1 shows the site of application highlighted. The site forms part of a row of commercial premises situated on the eastern side of Ankerbold Road, located to the west of the Midland Mainline Railway. To the west of the site, on the opposite side of Ankerbold Road, is a ribbon of detached dwellings situated within relatively spacious plots. As you can see from the image on the screen, these properties enjoy relatively generous frontages and are set well back from the highway edge. Moving on to slide 2. Slide 2 shows a zoomed-in view of the site, which more clearly shows the prevalence of on-street parking in the vicinity of the site, principally along the eastern side of Ankerbold Road. Moving on to slide 3, this shows the submitted site location plan with the site area edged in red. The application premises comprises a retail use specialising in the sale of garden supplies. Slide 4 shows the parcel locker in situ at the site frontage, located within the curtilage of the application premises forward of the site's gated access. Slide 5 shows the general street scene with the frontages of the residential properties seen on the western side of Ankerbold Road on the right of the image as you look at it. And slide 6 shows the driveways of the residential properties and the strong boundary treatments which separate these frontages from the highway edge. And the final slide is a photograph which was taken, just for clarification, on a Tuesday morning when these commercial enterprises along the eastern side of Ankerbold Road were operational. The photo shows that parking opportunities within the vicinity of the site are available. This was one of 3 officer visits to the site, during which there was no evidence to suggest that the siting of the parcel lockers resulted in unacceptable highway safety harm. And that concludes the officer presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. We have 3 speakers on this application. The first would be the local member, Councillor David Hancock.
Thank you, Chair.
Hancock, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. I've asked for this to be brought to Planning Committee because we have the advantage of this one being, with hindsight, all too often we're told about relying on the Highways Officer's report, but now we've actually got genuine evidence that this is having a disproportionate impact on the local community and on road safety. Unlike many other sites of this nature, there's no on-site parking, which means that vehicles that are using the facility are having to park on the road. It comes in peaks and troughs, so those photos that you've seen are all very well and good when it's a certain time. Very often people, as they're planning their day, will do the pickups and drop-offs at school time, and you've been provided with photographs which show what it's like typically. Vehicles are parked in the carriageway, narrowing the road to a single lane. What wasn't clear from the photographs that you've seen is that there's actually very little pavement on the side on the residential side of the street. So as it's cutting it down to a single carriageway, there's no footpath. It's purely there. Drivers are pulling across the road and parking in residents' private driveways. The photograph that you saw with those trees is actually the driveways of the properties across the road. That's being used as a car park. Pavements are completely blocked, forcing people, including those with disabilities, into the road. Obviously, as people know, drop pavements are few and far between, so once someone in a wheelchair has to go on the road, they're stuck there until they get to another one. Delivery lorries and vans are unable to pass safely, creating congestion and obstruction, and cars are having to mount the pavement or reverse dangerously to exit. As you can see from the various different photos that I've put, it's not occasional misuse, it's routine, and it's happening because this is a 24/7 self-service locker with no parking, no enforcement and no control. Ankerbold Road is already heavily used by commercial traffic and lined with residential properties on the opposite side. The cumulative impact of development in the area is already being felt, and this locker adds an entirely new category of unmanaged vehicle movements, often by people unfamiliar with the location. While officers argue that the harm is limited, the photographic evidence tells a different story. This is not safe or appropriate location for this kind of facility, particularly not without any dedicated provision for access or parking. Residents have reported a significant increase in vehicles turning across traffic, blocking driveways and obstructing footways. These are not trivial inconvenience, they are genuine highway safety risks and amenity harms in breach of policies ID3, SS7 and SDC 12 of the local plan and MPPR 116. This is also a retrospective application. The facility was installed without permission and without regard for its impact. The planning system should not be used to legalise harmful development after the fact, particularly when they are so clearly evident. So for those reasons, I ask the committee to take full account of all of the problems on the ground and all of the evidence and refuse permission.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Members, have you any questions? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hancock. You were a member of this planning committee in previous years and you've had some time on it, so I hope you don't mind me asking you a technical question.
Absolutely.
About, as technical as I can get, about what you mentioned there in your 3 minutes, which is paragraph 116. You mentioned it would have a disproportionate impact and you provided evidence, but you know that it says in paragraph 116 it must be an unacceptable impact on highway safety.
And I think it meets those thresholds.
And you think it does? So that was my question, that it does?
Yeah. The fact that you're forcing disabled people and prams out into a single lane carriageway, that meets the threshold of unacceptable safety.
Right, so you think it's, so that was my question, unacceptable. I'll be asking officers the same thing when it comes to questions to officers. So that's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Durrant.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm looking at the traffic beforehand again in the photos you've submitted. So these photos are submitted at various points of day as figures 1 through to 18 rather. So these submitted at various times a day, or are they submitted in? Yeah, just a little bit more detail on these photos first of all.
There are various times of the day, and to be truthful, I've got a lot more, but you don't want to see multiple instances of the same thing.
Yeah, of course.
One of the particularly worst times that they're having it is on school drop-off and pick-up times. A lot of people are obviously deciding that they're going to do whatever they're doing while they're taking the kids to school or picking them up. So at a time when you've already got a lot of vulnerable people on the street, it's happening. I think more of the nuisance stuff is happening at night when people are pulling into opposing driveways, but you've got several people here who are obviously straight across the road from it, so they'll be able to testify further on that one. But yeah, it's very much a peak and trough situation.
Yeah, the reason why I was asking is as you'll have known to done in the past when you've been on, you have a quick look on Google Maps and look at the history, and there's plenty of traffic there from before. The earliest photograph is in 2009, where while they're not demonstrating, such as what Figure 1 is doing, for just to pick one out, Figure 1 is doing, there is still plenty of traffic parked along those sides.
And I think that, to be fair, is proving the point that Councillor Foster's just made. Obviously, when it comes to the to MPPF 116, we have to prove that this development in itself is having the disproportionate effect.
Right.
So, yes, there's always been a lot of traffic there, but it's the nature of this traffic, the volume of it, and the way that they're just casually coming and parking, crossing through the traffic and obstructing it. That is what's changing it from being regular usage into the point where it's crossing that threshold.
So where I have the difficulty is this, is like, I can see where you're saying from Figure 1 and Figure 2, where you can see, well, Figure 1 less so because they're parking awkwardly and they have to come out into the road, but you know, that's grey areas where we can discuss. The blue car, that's not great. But there's ones where, just skip ahead, is where you've got the commercial vehicles. And so just to take, for example, Figure 7, you've got 2 commercial trucks there. Those have, as far as I can see, nothing to do with this development itself.
Don't just approach me because I've not got
Yes,
a copy
of
of
course,
that in front
yes.
of me, so
My
remembering
apologies.
which picture is which isn't the easiest thing in the world.
Sorry about that. So looking at these, right?
Yeah.
They don't look like they're linked to it, and these can be the line of traffic. That's the bit where I've got the problem, because you're looking at your
key element,
line of traffic.
Yeah, your key element here is that without this, they would have been able to move freely. And oh, bless you.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'll run back to my seat.
Your key element there is that without this being in place, they would have actually been able to access properly and appropriately.
So so that's the point you're making.
Yeah.
They would be able to approach appropriately. Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Any other members? Then thank you. You may take your seat.
Thank you, Chair.
Gallery. Thank you. Our next speaker is an objector, Mr. Geoffrey Fagan. You'll have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. There are 8 impost boxes within 1.5 miles of Ankerbold Road. A neighbour has visited them all. If you go further, out to 3 miles, we have a total of 12 impost boxes and drop-off points. These post boxes are positioned in large car parks such as Tesco, Co-op, Aldi, Bateman's Mill, for example. They have large, safe parking facilities, which are well illuminated and have CCTV cameras, barriers protecting the public and the units themselves. None of these post boxes are positioned in a residential area, not one. The parcel collection point opposite our properties has no safe off-road parking. It has no safety barriers, and cars and vans and trucks constantly reversing in and out of the unit 5, where the box is positioned outside of the gates onto the very busy Ankerbold Road. The in-post box Ankerbold Road holds up to 42 parcels at a time. 42 parcels at a time. That is potentially 85 cars a day using this box on a daily basis, and those numbers I've come to as 42 parcels being collected by parcel users and 42 parcels being dropped off to be returned, including 1 large van, deliveries and collections. This is a totally, potentially, of 595 cars a week outside of our homes, operating 24/7 unsupervised. That makes 2,380 parcel collections in 1 month. And if we take that to the year, it's 28,560 on basic raw maths. As autumn and winter approach, these numbers could increase dramatically going towards the peak season of Christmas, and you can imagine what that would be like. Road safety is a genuine concern. Already we have 5 existing businesses operating on the south of Ankerbold. Customers and employees parking their vehicles on the roadside, as there is minimum no off-road parking. Deliveries too, unloading on pavements, pushing pedestrians onto the main road. This creates a one-track road most mornings and early evenings, which is exacerbated very much by the school run to Tupton Hall High School, the biggest high school in the area. People dropping off parcels are parking where they can, they're in a rush, across our personal driveways and actually on our driveways, blocking the road, and most importantly, they have no concern for their own safety, the pedestrians or other drivers. It is an accident waiting to happen. It is also worth noting that we are having 200 homes at this present moment being built on Ankerbold Road, and this will increase traffic quite considerably over the next few years. The residents would suggest, like other post boxes, this box be removed and relocated to a safer, more sensible, non-residential part of our village. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Members, any questions for the Speaker? No? Then I'll ask you to return
Thank
to
you,
the
Chair.
gallery. Thank you. Our next speaker, also an objector, Mr. Norman Hill. You will have 3 minutes when you're ready.
This is the only in-post box within a 3-mile radius that is outside of residential properties, as all the others are in areas where shops and car parks, as has already been stated. It begs the question, how would anybody feel if one morning one of these boxes arrived outside your home without planning permission and then a blaze of lights at night? Since the in-post box has been installed, it has caused neighbours many problems with cars, constantly using and blocking our drives to turn and reverse back onto Ankerbold Road. The photographs provided clearly show the problems that are caused on a daily basis. This is very dangerous because of the open plan scheme, so no gates, which was a planning stipulation when our houses were built in the 1980s. There have already been near misses with cars pulling onto our drives while we have been pulling out. Our children playing in the front gardens with cars suddenly pulling in to turn around, and even when adults are mowing their lawns or tending their gardens. Also, one neighbour was exiting her drive with her children in her car when the in-post delivery van pulled right out in front of her on the wrong side of the road. How she missed a head-on collision, she still doesn't know. Many of the houses opposite the in-post box have video door cameras, CCTV and security lights. Since the box has been installed, all of these devices are continually being activated, not only causing a nuisance, but also waking us up at night and upsetting family pets. This is summer. In winter, the headlights will constantly be shining directly into our homes. Over the past few weeks, the weather has been hot. Most residents have had their windows open at night only to hear cars pulling up, slamming their doors, playing loud music, leaving their engines running, and even slamming the in-post doors, often not staying just for a few minutes but for extended periods. I have lived on Ankerbold Road at my current house for 37 years, and never has the road or the businesses outside my property affected our way of life until now. This has turned our road into a real threat 24 hours a day. The residents have supplied over 50 photographs and 9 videos to planning and development to show the reality of the situation being discussed today. These are not one-off issues, but a constant problem that will only increase as more houses are built along Ankerbold Road.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Have members got any questions? Councillor Jones.
Mr. Hill, I'd like to ask you an unfair question.
Yep.
Based on your CCTV camera activations, how many people are collecting late in the evening?
Well, I don't have a CCTV camera, so I don't actually know, but you would have to look at about of our rooms. There's a constant stream up to midnight.
Up to midnight?
Yeah, maybe after that, but hopefully we're asleep at that time. But you see, first of all, there weren't very many, but now it's known. We see a constant stream of cars.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tarrant.
Thank you for coming today, Mr. Hill. I just wanted to ask you to repeat and clarify a little bit. You said about in the 1980s there was a condition, and I didn't. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, from what I understand, we bought the second house that was developed there out of 5, and originally the builders wanted to build over 20 houses in the whole big plot. We were restricted down to the 5 houses that were built, and it was an open plan development where there were no gates and no walls between the houses. So we can't stop people driving onto our drives. There's no barrier at all.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr Hill. You may take your seat back in the public gallery. It's now time to ask officers any questions. Councillor Baker.
A couple of questions for officers, particularly bear in mind the comments that have just been made. How is this defined as sustainable development? And the other one is, surely there are umpteen better locations to put such a thing than right next to or in a Belmouth or in an entrance to commercial premises on a busy road with only 1 footway. So they're my 2 questions, please.
Thank you for your question. In terms of the sustainability, it's set within the confines of the settlement development limits for Tupton, which is a location where generally new development is considered to be acceptable in principle and sustainable as a consequence of it being situated within the built framework of the village. So it would be accessible by non-car journeys, if you like. It would be accessible on foot for local residents of the village. So it is considered to be a sustainable location. In terms of the necessity and the location, we would suggest that we are assessing this purely on its planning merits, and it's not really for us as officers to make a judgment as to whether there would be a preferred or preferable location. It's simply an assessment of how this application stacks up against the relevant development plan policies and the policies within the national policy framework. So it's not for us as officers, as I understand it, to make a judgment as to whether there would be a better location. It's ultimately for us as officers to assess whether this would be in accord with the relevant planning policies.
May I come back on that, Chair, just briefly? So what would stop anybody with sufficiently shaped entrance to their property sticking one of these up and getting the rent off it?
Again, we'd have to assess each application on its merits, and that's what we're seeking to do here. So the application is for a parcel locker at the frontage of Unit 5 on Ankerbold Road, and we've assessed it against the relevant development plan policies. We wouldn't be able to speculate on any other applications, and they would be judged against the same policies, presuming the policy context was the same.
Thank you.
Councillor Gare.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a quick question. How long has this been there? I couldn't
so
find it in there.
Yeah, that was clarified in the
Since March.
March,
the
okay.
11th of March of this year. Yeah.
And my second question is, I mean, are these lockers, I mean, we're seeing them everywhere, and generally they're a good idea, but do they generally come with no parking? I mean, with no designated parking? Or as part of a car park? They're often in car parks, aren't they?
So I understand it's case by case, but on a basis. We've had a number of applications submitted within the district. The site circumstances vary quite widely, but predominantly my understanding is that a number of the sites do benefit from off-street parking. Obviously this one doesn't, but we've assessed it on its merits and concluded with the guided by the Highway Authority comments as well to ultimately conclude that it doesn't have an unacceptable impact on highway safety in the vicinity of the site.
Councillor Leggett.
Yeah, I just wondered what restrictions were on the hours of operation of the other businesses.
I do believe that there are some. Sorry, I can't clarify that off the top of my head. I don't know. There is some planning history for the unit for Unit 5. I'm not sure if there are conditions on hours within that, but in terms of the other premises within the vicinity of the site, I'm not sure what the limits would be.
Councillor Cooper.
To this, but how often is it, you said it's 42, it's a 42 parcel unit. How often is that filled in a day? Is that just one fill per day?
It's not clarified in the submission how that would work in terms of when it's filled, how often. So we've assessed it in terms of obviously visiting the site and made an analysis of the likely trips, but ultimately my understanding of how it operates is limited in that regard. I don't know how often it is filled entirely, so unfortunately I'll be unable to answer that question.
I'm just trying to get a gauge of the amount of traffic on that road that is coming to that unit as opposed to coming to the businesses on that unit, and how often they are there. That's my main concern about this. I've heard what the speakers have said, and they've said there's an increase, but I'm not quite sure how many parcels there are there, so I can't work out how many times people are accessing that unit.
It's accepted in our officer report that there's inevitably going to be an increase in activity within the vicinity of the site as a consequence of this. But as officers, we need to assess whether fundamentally the proposed development would result in an unacceptable level of highway safety harm, given the commercial backdrop, the existing prevalence of parking on the eastern side of Anchor Bowl Road, and the evidence that we have from visiting the site that there was an abundance of parking spaces available that would have been accessible and not detrimental to highway safety in the vicinity of the site, in our view.
Okay, thanks for that.
Chair, if I can just perhaps add to that, you've heard various things said to you this afternoon by speakers, steady stream of traffic you've heard, 82 vehicles per day coming to the facility. However that comes down to the facts, we can't confirm or deny any of what's been said to you this afternoon. All that we can say is, in terms of what Colin said to you, we have specifically gone to the site at one of reported to us the most busy times of the day, i.e. just after the school drop-off in the morning, and we weren't aware when we visited the site as officers of any harm to highway safety at all, certainly no significant harm, and we've had two other visits when similarly that's been the case. So that's our experience as officers, and that's what we can put to you. The other issue I would just mention, Chair, is you've also heard that Anchor Bowl Road is a busy road. Many of you will know that, and certainly it is heavily trafficked. You've got to assess, in terms of highway safety, whether the traffic that's been attracted to this facility overall has, as Councillor Foster said, that unacceptable impact on highway safety. And you've got to weigh in the balance there the advice of the statutory consultee, the County Council, who's raised no objections to this. And I say this to members often, in terms of the issue of highway safety, you have to be very careful about accepting what's been said to you. You need to be satisfied, if you are to place weight on that is overriding in planning terms. So you can listen to what's been said to you this afternoon. I can't quantify that or give any assurance that is or isn't correct. You must take that on its face. But whatever, you need to assess whether in highway safety terms this facility unacceptably impacts highway safety. So in terms of amenity, there are other issues, and you've also heard about that this afternoon. But as Colin said, this, and you've heard, there are businesses operating along this road in any case. They will continue to operate here. There is parking and visitors coming to those properties in any case, and that will continue. You need to assess whether this facility unacceptably impacts on the amenity of those residents. For whatever reason, you need to be satisfied as well that that is the case over and above what is an existing situation. And the final point I would make, Chair, is that the unacceptable use of people's gardens, driveways, turning, arriving at people's houses is something that we couldn't control in any case, and that must be considered on its face. We're not condoning that behaviour, but that shouldn't, in my opinion, override the proper planning considerations that you have to consider, because that could be addressed by other means rather than refusing the planning consent. So I'm not saying that amenity and highway safety aren't material, but you need to take a balanced view in terms of the impact of this development on what is an existing situation and whether this facility unacceptably impacts highway safety, amenity or any other planning consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
I get there in the end.
Just come on. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. One question for you, Colin. In paragraph 7.8, you state that it is anticipated that collections will also occur on foot. Now, in my experience, most of these lockers have been serviced by cars in supermarkets, and looking at the photographs you've seen, there's been a lot of cars in that area. So when you say anticipated, what sort of basis do you form that opinion on?
I think again that comes in as a consequence of the site being within the defined settlement development limits for the village. So
it's not been observed.
Again, it's a sustainable location that could in theory be accessed by foot. It's in, as alluded to previously in terms of some of the comments, it's in a residential area, so fundamentally it would be accessible by foot. And that's not to say that it's not being accessed by vehicles. We anticipate that equally there would be an increase in vehicular movements in the vicinity of the site, and that's been acknowledged in the officer report. But as alluded to previously, we're looking at it in terms of the policy test, in terms of whether that additional activity would amount to unacceptable highway safety harm, and we've concluded as part of the planning judgment that that would not be the case, and that's corroborated by the highway officer consultation response as well.
Just coming back, it's not been observed. You haven't observed a lot of people on foot. No?
As officers?
Yes.
No, we haven't.
Thank you.
Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Hill said there'd been 9 videos submitted, CCTV, along with around 50 pictures. We don't have access to them. Have the planning officer seen that many?
Those were submitted. There was a request made as part of that submission that they would not be publicised as part of the planning application online documents.
Thank you. So your decisions have looked at all those photos and those CCTV footages and have taken into your consideration for your recommendations. Is that correct?
The videos that were available to view and the photographs have been considered in our assessment. Equally, those submitted in conjunction with the late representations have also been taken into account.
Thank you. Just following on from that, the main concern for me that sounds material concern is those dropped curbs and those parking. Now, you said those have not reached that threshold. Could you try and quantify for me, from an officer's point of view, when the blockages of dropped curbs and things like that would meet that threshold for yourselves, just so I can have it clearer in my head, because we're talking grey areas here where we're giving your expert opinion on these, so I'd just like that to be quantified a little bit.
Yeah, I think it is. I think to answer your question, I think it's quite difficult to quantify. It is a planning judgment, and it's made in conjunction with kind of myriad factors, including the DCC highways consultation response, officers' visits to the site and understanding of the area, and also weighing in the representations that have been received. So I think it is very difficult to quantify that. We're looking at the site circumstances as we find them and applying the policies as best we can in terms of our interpretation. And it's, as mentioned, our interpretation that we don't believe that high bar for unacceptable highway safety harm has been met, despite the fact that we have acknowledged that there is inevitably going to be an increase in activity within the site and vehicular in the vicinity of the site and vehicular movements within the highway.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose I'm thinking, I mean, I do take on what you're saying about highway safety and, but I mean, this doesn't look ideal, and maybe there aren't ideal places, but I wonder if we should be thinking about setting precedents. If we say this is okay with this level of parking problems and, you know, lack of pavements and all the rest of it, we're going to see more and more of these lockers coming along, aren't we? So should we be thinking forward and wondering whether we should say that there's some places which aren't acceptable?
In terms of your decision making, you should be consistent in your decision making. So where one site is equivalent to the other, you should be making the same decision across the piece. Precedent is more difficult to quantify, because I would argue that all planning applications have some general difference in terms of where they are and how well related they are to other features, etc., etc. So I think precedent is not the word I would use, but you should be consistent in your decision making. Just in terms of the specific points that Councillor Garr makes, Chair, the issues that you've mentioned are material matters. Highway safety, amenity, as you've heard this afternoon, sustainability, all those things are material matters. But you need to be satisfied that in this case, and others that could be compatible with it, that those matters are unacceptable, and it makes the retention of this locker unacceptable. And that's the test that you need to assess. And as Colin mentioned earlier, not that there may be better locations. There may well be better locations, but that's not what you're faced with this afternoon. You need to consider this on its merits, and if you agree with officers that the impacts are acceptable, you should be approving it. If you believe that the impact on amenity, highway safety, or any other matter makes it unacceptable in planning terms, then that would lead to you resisting it, and that's the judgment that you're faced with. Hopefully we've given you enough information as officers to make that judgment. That's what we seek to do, but you have to make that judgment and have the balance of the impacts over the positive elements that this facility might bring. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, can we or could we look at a time frame for this then? So could we have a 2-year or a 1-year temporary time frame on this, so we have a chance to look at that, and then if it carries on, it has to come back to us again, similar to the last application?
You could certainly do that, yes, if you felt you needed a period of time based on what you've heard this afternoon to give a period of time for it to, whether 3 months, 4 months, if it's been in place is enough time for it to settle down and it's used to become consistent, I don't know. But yes, if you felt that a 12-month temporary period, for example, from now, would give you enough opportunity to assess the issues and whether we receive a number of complaints about its use and amenity, whether there are road accidents reported, etc. It would give you time to do that. So that would be a perfectly reasonable option to take if you felt that would give you sufficient time to review the provision of the facility and its use. So 1 year, 2 years or more, or any combination of that. It would be unreasonable, I think, to go for a lesser period than 12 months, because that would mean that the applicant was incurred with expense pretty much soon after permission being granted. But I think anything beyond 1 year would be an option, a reasonable option for you to take if you felt that was overriding and would allow you that opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions, I will open the floor to debate. Councillor Leggett.
Well, personally, I find it unacceptable. Mr Fagan, I can confirm Mr Fagan is right, because I've checked myself. There are 8 of these lockers within a mile. So I can't see that there's the need to have a locker where that one's positioned, because personally I just think that is the most ludicrous place I've ever seen. All the others, as somebody mentioned, are in car parks, large car parks, Clay Cross, the car garage on the A61 in Clay Cross. They've all got numerous parking spaces, dozens of parking spaces where people can pull on, because we all know nobody walks anywhere with a parcel these days. And also, I mean, I know these people are on a road that's residential and commercial, but those other businesses are not operating at night. Now, you know, if a business had come forwards to us and said we want to operate 24 hours a day, you know, if it was a restaurant or a fish and chip shop or something like that, something would be said. You know, and I think what Councillor Gare is referring to, I think this is, I know, as Adrian says, president is a strange, but we all know, we all live. I mean, can you imagine if these are popping up on everybody's street just for convenience of people? It would be utter chaos, and they're not that necessary, not when you've got as many as there is, because the place is becoming saturated with them in good positions that are a lot better than this one. That's my personal opinion.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'll cover DCC Highways officers and their comments, and it's been relied on quite a lot by our officers, what they've said. But I know from experience, from being here on this planning committee a long time, having had the highways officers here and listened to how much time and how much time they spend on these things, and I've seen these comments here, I haven't got the greatest level of trust when it comes to, they are the experts and we do listen to them, but we have to be careful about how much time they spend on them. So that's my first comment. So it's not about evidence, it's about lack of evidence. And when it comes to an earlier comment made about an unacceptable impact on highway safety, that they said it wouldn't, they haven't said that, it's our officers that have said that. And we're drawing that conclusion from what they've said to us, that they haven't objected. All they haven't done is not objected and made a couple of other comments. So that's on highways. When it comes to the evidence we've received from the photographic evidence and the verbal evidence we've heard from residents here, I place a lot of weight on that, and I certainly place a lot of weight on my colleague, Councillor Hancock. I've worked with him long enough to know he's not here for no reason at all. So I've got a lot of trust and a lot of faith in that. But it makes it even more difficult when we look at it as an application here and we look at our options. I trust in that what he says may well be true, in that there is an unacceptable impact on highway safety as per paragraph 116, but there's not enough evidence for that here. I'd feel uncomfortable suggesting we turn this application down, because this could go to appeal. They could look at it, the planning inspector could look at it and say, and push it straight through. I understand that. So I don't feel there's enough evidence here to be able to turn this application down. Yet I feel very uncomfortable with agreeing to this based on what we've heard from residents. So that's where I am on that. I don't feel there's enough evidence here, certainly not when we look at what DCC sent. So I don't feel comfortable also giving it a year's planning permission and looking at the impact. We're lucky in that it's already there. It's been there since March. What we can do is ask for more evidence now. We can ask for more evidence from as it currently stands. So I'd be in favour of, as part of this debate, I'd be in favour of deferring this, not turning it down, because then it could go and be accepted on appeal, because I don't feel we have enough evidence. I'd be interested here in deferring this to a later date and asking the applicant to have their own traffic impact assessment. Once we've got a professional traffic impact assessment from the applicant, we can make another assessment on this. There is no need to rush into this. The thing's already built. We're not turning it down and and forcing it to go to an inspector, and then we could have made the wrong decision here and we could be faced with costs. So there's no danger to our organisation here. But this is already built. We could ask for a traffic impact assessment before we agree this. So I think we should be deferring this. That also gives any objectors, the 5 objectors, and I know it's an onerous task, but they could also look at their own traffic impact assessment. We could look at further evidence and we could weigh that all up here on this planning committee. It's already built. There's nothing pressing that we have to give this permission now. And it doesn't put the organisation in a difficult position by not giving it planning permission without sufficient evidence. So I'm in favour of asking for a traffic impact assessment from the applicant. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dorrance.
Thank you. Myself to come in. Excellent. I disagree and agree with Councillor Foster. The problem I have with Councillor Liggett's consideration is that, you know, there's ones elsewhere. We have to consider this application on the merit of this application at all. We can't really turn around and say, well, there's one close by, so we don't need another one. I don't see in policy where we can actually turn around and say no, because there's one within a mile. I also think that lacks a little bit of consideration of those individuals who are walking to the location. A mile is a long way if you are walking. So I don't feel we can consider there's another one close by, because these are incredibly convenient for residents. While I do accept, I do understand and appreciate and empathise with those on the street being impacted by it, it is a difficult consideration. I don't accept the Councillor Foster's comments on DCC highways. I know he's been working with them for longer, but I am very much of the view that if we have officers' professional recommendations, we should be looking at them reasonably and professionally ourselves and not disparaging them. We have received the additional 9 videos from our officers and 50 pictures from our officers, and that's gone into our considerations, and I do have the utmost respect for our officers because we do talk to them directly. Looking directly at the photos, the ones submitted by Councillor Hancock, there's a number of these, some of these pictures I am really struggling to see how this scan, tap and go, however we want to call it, is actually the root cause of the issue there. Now, figure 1 looks, you know, pretty cut and dry, but they're not fully blocking the dropped curb. Figure 2, I can't tell why that car's parked there. Skipping ahead to figure 3, the density of parking, and this has been referred back to other figures. Just to jump away from that for a second, I took the time to look at Google Street View. There's a level of density of parking on this. If you go back through the history of Street View of this, going back quite some time, going all the way back to 2009. Now in places, I accept that it changes, but then if we go to different times of day, on any day, just like our officers done, we will experience different levels of density. We have 3 businesses there: Tupton Supplies, Lord's Roofing, and Peak Auto Trims, all operating businesses in that location, with traffic coming from there as well. So for vehicles that are using those businesses, I don't feel like we can penalise this other business for their activities that have been operating there for a long time, such as those displayed by the looks of it in figure 7, where there's 2 trucks that don't look like they have anything to do with these parcels at all. And similarly with the figure 6, I can't see how this is interacting with the proposed planning here. And equally, figure 8, I can't see how this flatbed truck or this whatever that is interacting with the planning. There is a myriad of bits of evidence there that are showing while cars are parked awkwardly and problematically, I can't see, and I agree with Councillor Foster, that I can't tell that these are actually related to the tap and go parcel collection. So I don't have the evidence to accept that. Now, that comes to 116 and defer. I don't agree with Councillor Foster on the traffic impact assessment, and the reason why for that is, as we saw in the previous application, we would typically ask for a traffic impact assessment on large developments, 10 houses or more, or 1,000 square metres. And are we setting an unfair precedent that are penalising them for these things that have? But that is the rules we operate by initially. So I'm not convinced that we'll be able to do that. Now, I would want to take a little bit more guidance from yourself, Adrian, on putting a time limit on accepting this application, because I am concerned about the level of traffic there. I'm not rejecting any of that, but based on the evidence we have today, I can't see how we can reject the application. But I would want to hear more on, say, a 2-year time limit on that to look at it again. I just cannot see how we could do a traffic impact assessment based upon the information you've currently given us.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll come back on a couple of those points. One is I wasn't disparaging officers at DCC. they don't have the time, and they've said so when they've turned up here, they don't have the time to spend an awful lot of attention on each application. It's not about their skill, it's about how much time they've got to give each application, and they don't give them the time. We know that, they've come and told that they've come and said it here themselves here. That evidence has already been given. When you said earlier, you don't have the evidence, that's what I'm saying, completely agree with you. We don't have the evidence, which is why what I'm saying is we should be deferring and asking for the evidence. Then we can make an absolute clear decision. We're not guessing on photos. You're not sure about this photo, you're not sure about that. We ask for the evidence, and we give the objectors and the local councillors the opportunity to provide that evidence. There's nothing spoiling, as I said earlier. There's nothing spoiling at all. It's already there. The business is operating. We could easily defer it. We're not turning it down. Nobody's been put in a difficult position. The applicants certainly aren't, because it's already there and they're doing the business. Our organisation isn't, because we're not turning it down. And when it comes to creating a precedent, plenty of times we've asked for traffic impact assessments at this stage and deferred. So it's not like we're waiting for a huge 300 houses to be built and having a traffic impact assessment or a supermarket. It's not. We can ask at any time. They can provide one and bring it to us and we can look at it. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to collect evidence. We don't just say yes or no and make a guess. We're here to make sound judgments and not just guess and hope for the best. We're looking in this position here where we are, in that we're not just asking someone to provide a traffic impact assessment on what it might be. It's already there. They can actually find that evidence. So it's not hard. We're not putting anybody out. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. 3 points I'd like to make, please. By installing this development without seeking planning permission, the applicants avoided addressing any of these matters up front, and that leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And it reminds me of a few years ago we had a lot of people installing coffee shops all over the country and then dealing with retrospective applications and winning most of them. So I don't like the precedent of doing it. I've already explained I don't personally like putting such things in driveways. I mean, as my colleague here says, you know, why do we turn the next one down that appears on a housing estate? None of these roads were designed for such an installation. The third one is DCC Highways. Let's not get emotive about this, people. Their comment is, the proposed location of the in-post locker will not interfere with the access to the unit and does not interfere with the adjacent footway. No comment as to the effect on the highway. We cannot use this as evidence to say that DCC are happy with the effect on the highway. They are silent on it. So please, members, would you read that comment before we get too emotive? And then, as a personal opinion, and it is subjective, and I accept that, I think the overall effect on the local amenity is something we shouldn't support. So I will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Any other members? Do officers have anything they need to add before we move on?
Just there is one thing, Chair. I don't want to reiterate the points I've already made, so I won't. But Councillor Durant asked about the issue of a temporary permission. It is open to you this afternoon to grant a temporary permission if you feel, as we discussed previously, that there is a requirement or a need that you feel to have the ability to monitor the development and see how it beds down over time. I also accept the facility has been in place for 4 months, I think, by my calculation already. So that needs to be your judgment whether you think that 4 months has been sufficient for that bedding down period, or whether further would be beneficial to you to judge the matter before proceeding. And on that basis, you've also got to take into account what you've heard this afternoon from the speakers who've come to address you, and from our own advice and evidence that we've been able to provide you this afternoon. But in short, Chair, a temporary permission is an option for you to consider, although I would suggest in this instance a temporary period of 12 months is probably appropriate because of the time that it's already been in place. That's without seeking to prejudice, Chair, the decision that members will have to make, because it's your decision and you need to balance all those factors. That would be my advice in terms of a temporary permission if you were to choosing to go down that route.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I completely disagree on that. I think that temporary permission would be completely acceptable to see how it went on if it wasn't there. It's already there, you know, so I don't find that acceptable at all. No point repeating myself on that, but it's already there. It's been there since March. While they're getting traffic impact assessments done, will be another 2-3 months. You know, if it comes back after the recess, we might be looking at this in October. Plenty of time to get things done without giving it 12 months planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Durrant.
Yes, thank you. So the main concern with me is actually, just referring back to 7.15, is actually the footway. That's my main concern. It is a busy road and it has industrial vehicles going along there as well. So I've accepted our officers that these extra vehicles won't affect the highway itself, but the footpath and the dropped curb and the disability access is I disagree with yourself respectfully, Councillor Baker, because the footpath is actually my main concern. That's where my concern is. Now, looking at I don't know if you could see on the photos, but I looked on, as I said, I looked on Street View, and the pathway on the other side of the road is narrow, but it is available, but it cuts off just further down, and also some of the private properties, hedgerows do grow out into it. So that is a concern, but unfortunately, a hedgerow growing out, I don't think we can consider that. So to run along with Councillor Foster's suggestion, with the highways, would they be looking more closely at the pathway, or would it simply be, again, we'd look at it a few months down the line, and our concern about pathways, would that just come back or not be looked at? Could you give me a little bit more information on that? Should Councillor Foster's suggestion be the one that this planning committee goes with? Could you just give me a bit more information on that, please?
The Highway Authority would look at highway safety in the round, so looking at vehicular and pedestrian safety. So I think my understanding is that would be a part of their consideration and their analysis, that they would look at pedestrian safety. So in effect, looking at the highway in its entirety, so the road and the footway. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, somewhat difficult, because again, it's the accessibility part of it. Is that if we have people in mobility scooters, which we have a lot of people in mobility scooters, and you saw in one of the photos that Councillor Hancock submitted that there was a fella on I think it was a fella on the road there with his mobility scooter. That's my main concern. The cars being awkward with each other. It's an industrial area with a lot of cars, and there's housing estates all around. They're always going to be a little bit awkward. It's the district we live in.
That'll come up on a traffic impact assessment. How it affected it.
Yeah, so that's where my concerns are, is the footpath and the blockages and the like. So just to come back on the officers, on the previous application, we were saying large housing developments, more than 10 houses, 1,000 square metres of industrial. So that was on that application, but on this application, is it still reasonable to ask these individuals, this company, to perform that highways assessment, in your professional opinion?
If members feel that further information on highways is essential for this consideration of this development, then we would take the views of planning committee and go back to the applicant. The applicant may say, not going to provide it. He may say, I will provide it. But we could ask, and then that would be something that we would seek a highway view on as well. But we would ask and seek the advice, seek the view of the applicant, whether they would be prepared to undertake that or not. I would say that normally a development of this scale is not something that we would seek that level of information for. But we're here, Chair, to take the views of members, and if that's considered essential in this case to allow you to make your decision, we would put that to the applicant.
Thank you. I'll let others come in first.
I was just going to agree with Councillor Foster, and as Adrian's just said, it's not unusual, but they have put this in without planning permission. So I think in this case that we should ask for a traffic more information, because they've, you know, had the cheek, if you like, to put it in without planning permission. We've got residents upset. It's had a 3-month test period. So I think we're right to ask personally.
Councillor Durrant.
Oh, no. Chair.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it might not be a statutory request, like, say, a supermarket or a big development, but there's plenty of occasions on this committee where we'd ask for it for a shop, on how it affects the road outside. I think of plenty of examples, you know, especially in my hometown, where that's the first thing we've asked for. And we've said defer it until we get more information. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Like I said, there's nothing spoiling here. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to open the floor for motions. Sorry, Councillor Peterson.
I was just going to say I have to agree. I think in this case, pavement is a very serious concern. It's no good the highway saying it doesn't affect the adjacent footway, as they've said. It does, and it's, if you park, we know people park on pavements, and as a pedestrian, I get very cross about it. And having to manoeuvre around cars that have parked all the way on pavement just to post a letter is unacceptable. And I think, yes, we do need a judgment on this one, and we do need an impact.
Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, sorry to come back in again. I'll make this brief. So looking again at the pavement on the other side of the road, there is no dropped curb once you reach the edge of the pavement. So it's either stick to this side or go on the road for people who would have to use those dropped curbs. The difficulty we have is that looking at the older images on this area is we still have vehicles blocking the dropped curbs further up from the other businesses. So that's still a concern.
I'm now opening the floor to motions. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I propose we defer this to a later date until we have a traffic impact assessment from the applicant.
Councillor Liggett.
I'll second it.
Okay. The motion's been proposed and seconded. I'll ask the members to now vote.
So this is on deferring it?
Yes, this is simply on deferring it. Right, the motion's been granted and it will be deferred. Thank you very much. I'll now ask the officers to run through the next report.
I don't know if you're waiting for me to come in, Chair.
I am
my
waiting for
apologies.
you.
You were snoozing, weren't you?
I hope members consider this worth it, Chair. The number of appeals that have been determined this month, as ever, there have been an interesting number of appeals, and they're set out on page 34 of your papers. You will note that one appeal has been allowed, and you may recall at the last meeting me talking about the change in policy stance nationally at the turn of the year, whereby previously the changes of use of properties such as this, the impact was no greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt was the consideration, whereas now the consideration is no, and Colin will correct me if I'm wrong here, but no substantial impact on openness is the test. And this is one of those cases that's been caught up in that assessment. So this allowed appeal is based on the 2025 consideration of the NPPF, whereas the application was considered on the 2024 MPPF, and that consideration in terms of impact on the green belt is now different, and this is an interesting case where that change has impacted the outcome. As officers, we believe it's impacted fundamentally the outcome of that appeal. Two interesting dismissed appeals. The Mrs Duckenfield case at Dronfield is interesting Greenbelt case in that was still found to be inappropriate development for a new house in the Greenbelt. Consideration in that case of Greybelt as well. Also interesting assessment of various other issues, listed building and heritage issues, biodiversity, and, if my memory serves me, coal mining risk. And they were all considered in that appeal. So in terms of the fundamentals of Greenbelt, it still retains its status in planning policy as being a very important consideration. It's just the assessment in terms of changes of use and conversion of buildings. That's where the previous developed land issue has changed in terms of its test. The Mr Lomas appeal, do commend members to this in particular because it's rather a small scale development, but it does just show that the impact of schemes on the character of an area is important, because in this case Mr Lomas was proposing an agricultural building for proper agricultural purposes but distant from his current buildings, and therefore the inspector agreed with officers that siting was unacceptable in terms of its impact on the landscape. The landscape character was harmed by a detached and distant farm building from the other buildings, and the inspector wasn't convinced that operationally that location was necessary for that. And finally, Chair, Mrs Coddington, all appeal decisions in my opinion are interesting. Hopefully members agree with that, but in this instance it was in relation to a condition in respect of an access where the council had imposed a condition requiring a hard surfaced and compact finish to an access, and the applicant had introduced gravel to the finish, and the inspector agreed with the council that without that hard finish and that hard surfacing there was an unacceptable impact on highway safety by the potential for what's called deleterious material being dragged onto the highway and the impact that may have. So pleased with that decision in terms of that. It's quite a niche element, but again we were pleased that was dismissed, and therefore there will be now a need to have that hard surfacing introduced. Hopefully members find the appeal decisions that go to all members now interesting to read, and you can bring some of that interest and consideration to the decision making that you make each month at Planning Committee. I'll take any questions, Chair, but hope that's a helpful précis of those decisions.
Thank you, Adrian. Has anyone got any questions? Do we agree to note the report? Yep. Thank you. I do not have any urgent business, so I'll close the meeting.